Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk in a few minutes about China and Russia and their activities, both in Latin America and in Africa. But Admiral Fowler, since we've been sitting here, 8 Americans have died of drug overdoses in the last hour. 67,000 people a year, 1 person a day in Maine. What's going on with China and Russia are threats, they're indirect threats, they're important, but we're talking about Americans dying. And you and I have talked about this in the past. I've heard from you and from other national security officials that we are interdicting about 25% of the drug shipments through the ocean to North America that we know of. 25% of what we know of. To me, we're talking about allocating resources around the world for all kinds of threats. This is a direct threat killing Americans, and we don't have enough ships. I don't get it. When do we get to interdicting the ships that we know are carrying drugs into this country to kill our people?
It's a national security crisis.
Absolutely.
It's actually worse statistics than you mentioned. It's 25. We detect 25%. We're only interdicting 9%. And to interdict, we need greater partner capacity, as I mentioned in the answer to Senator Shaheen. We also need assets. At the end of the day, you've got to be on the field to compete. When the playing field is twice the size of the U.S.
Who do we need to talk to get those assets? The Secretary of Defense, the President, the Vice President? Where do we go? I mean, it's infuriating that we know what's coming, we know it's out there, and the phrase I got was, we have far more targets than we can action. That's a euphemism for we are woefully falling down on this responsibility.
Well, the Coast Guard stepped up in a big way. That our U.S. Navy continues to have readiness challenges that has them stretched globally, and that has impacted their force allocation to us.
Is it people or ships? Do we just need more ships, more armed?
It's not just ships, Senator. We need the intelligence, so we need the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance access. We have about 20% of what our need is there, and then that turns into the ability to interdict. We also need our steady funding in our security cooperation so we can help our partner nations help themselves. So it's pulling this together in a full court press beyond ships that we can work together with partners and in our interagency and get the W back in front of whole of government, Senator.
Well, I appreciate that, and I know that you're working on this, but I just hope you'll keep pressing. You know, if you have to say there's a really obnoxious senator that's on my back and I've got to do something, that's fine. I can fulfill that responsibility quite adequately. Let's talk about China for a minute. By the way, these charts to both of you are very helpful. It really graphically indicates what's going on. It seems to me China's following a sort of a two-track strategy in both Africa and South America. One is what I call debt imperialism. They're getting these small countries in debt to them, and then they've got their hooks into them. General, is that sort of part of what you see happening in Africa?
That is exactly what we're seeing. We're also seeing a new, more sophisticated development in that. So the debt trap diplomacy has now become known on the continent. Most African leaders are wise to it. Actually, I would commend our State Department for helping get African leaders more savvy about what the Chinese are doing with some of these debt trap loans. The Chinese are adapting, though, and evolving their presentation, and they're becoming more sophisticated about it. So I'm a little bit worried because they're getting smarter about it.
Well, that's a concern. But the other thing is a sort of a more direct. I think Admiral Fowler, you used the word positional advantage. Just looking at your chart, Jamaica, El Salvador, Ecuador, Chile, Belize. Ports. I mean, that's a strategic advantage. Whatever happened to the Monroe Doctrine? I mean, we're allowing an adversary, I won't say an enemy, but an adversary, to establish significant positional advantage within our hemisphere. Admiral?
Senator, it's not just the ports, it's IT infrastructure, it's space stations, it's cyber, it's safe cities, as General Townsend mentioned. And that China's figured out that the nations in Latin America and the Caribbean are cash-strapped. So instead of trying to do arms sales, they're coming in with significant gifts. I could cite 17 million in one country in South America, 20 million in a Caribbean nation. These are one-year gifts of trucks and boats and IT infrastructure, well beyond uniforms and PME. And that is alarming to me as they build not just debt, but dependency. And we're trying to build trust in teams.
Maybe our motto should be beware of Chinese bearing gifts and telecommunications equipment. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate your testimony.